Saskatchewan Roughriders now have 2 wins to their total. Team Canada's Olympic team this summer, 4 medals, 2 and 4. Pretty damn close. We were getting to that, and I know you and I were joking around that who would have more, the Canadian gold medals or Saskatchewan Roughrider wins. They're halfway there. But if you look at, there's been at least one bright spot throughout a tough season, win or lose. It has been Darian Durant. He's had great moments this season and showed the leadership abilities he still has at his age, approaching about 34 years. With that said, he's still not signed after this season. His contract is up, and Chris Jones, for whatever reason, can't seem to get a deal. I say the Riders should be smart enough to sign this guy. Do you agree? Re-sign him, I should say.
No, I think they will. If they're smart, it'll be one and done, 1 year at a time. But they've got to get an heir apparent, and I really don't think that they have that. If they don't get that heir apparent coming, you see a lot of the other teams in the league are pretty stacked on the depth chart, and I don't think Saskatchewan is, and they have to be concerned. I mean, with the injury history that he's had, yeah, he's playing well now, but I mean, he's always one good hit away from ending his season.
You see that with many quarterbacks. Ricky Ray's now being a prime example of that, and you see the carousel that's going on in Toronto. But do you think that this guy should be resigned? I think you say 1 year. I'm saying that he should be signed 2 years minimum, 3 years. I think he's still that caliber of a quarterback.
I think while they should have been doing something, getting the heir apparent when he was injured, they had 2 years and they kind of threw that away. And now this year is kind of a throwaway again, where you don't have the next guy coming up. So you re-sign him to be the mentor for that guy, but you have to get that new guy into the lineup. And eventually, okay, you want to sign him for 3 years, fine. Durant's the starter for that year, and then you got to transition. You got to transition out. You're not going to have a 37-year-old quarterback still leading your team when you have the next guy trying to make his room as well.
I think one of the things we could agree on is at least the Saskatchewan Roughriders are, one, competitive, and not the Montreal Alouettes, where they seem to be imploding big time. When you look at the ongoing fighting and bickering that has gone from the coaching staff to the actual players' side of things, recently with Rakeem Cato, the quarterback, and of course Deron Carter, the receiver, things do not look well in Montreal. And in particular, you had a time where you have Jim Popp, who's wearing a lot of hats as a GM, as a head coach, and his head coaching abilities and record hasn't been that great. We've seen that this year. He said he wasn't going to step down. Sure enough, the Montreal Alouettes brass kind of forced them into stepping down from that head coaching role. But when you look at all that and what happened to Jim Popp this past week, what can you say about him and the saga that's kind of lead up with this weird season for Montreal?
I mean, it's just showing that being two things at once isn't working anymore. It's not working in Saskatchewan. It's definitely not working in Montreal. I don't know if you can. It's getting to the point where maybe you can't be a coach, a GM, and the popcorn vendor as well. You have to pick your role, and I think he has a history of being a very good GM. Do what you're good at, and if you have, leave coaching to somebody else and worry about the role that you have to play.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, too many hats on. There was no supervision. I mean, yeah, it's professional football, but these guys obviously still require more supervision they were being given, and the inmates started to run the asylum, and away they went. So it's disappointing to see a franchise that has been a powerhouse for 15 years really just going downhill, but I mean, it tends to happen to everyone, and honestly, as a fan, I'm really hoping it happens to Calgary soon too.
Is this a sign of maybe the Riders should take a lesson of what's happening in Montreal? You talk. I think you guys touched about a guy who's wearing too many hats.
I think it's too late. He's Chris Jones has 9 hats on. There's no one in the organization that can fire Chris Jones except for Chris Jones. So until really the court of public opinion kind of hangs him, I don't think anything's going to change there, and it's going to be a slow burn.
How about this? Moving on to college football, probably one of the most controversial weekends regarding Penn State when they honored Joe Paterno, a man who, of course, a lot of people feel was not directly but indirectly responsible for what happened with Jim Sandusky and the whole abuse scandal that rocked the school as well as the NCAA as a whole. With that said, he has been reinstated in terms of all his wins. He is still the winningest coach now. They did honor him over the weekend. Do you think that in this case that Joe Paterno was rightfully honored and respected, or do you think that his career was tainted and that they shouldn't have done it?
I think they need to respect what he did on the field. What happened off the field has to be, not secondary, but it's got to be kept in mind. But I think that was Penn State's intent, was to honor the longevity, the consistency with the program, and what he gave to that institution. And of course it was going to draw light to, what he didn't see happening at the institution, or I guess did see and chose to ignore. That's a tough thing to happen, but obviously the institution was comfortable with what they were doing and proceeded forward.
And if you're going to reinstate all those victories, you're going to reinstate the celebration of those victories. So it's kind of warranted for Penn State to want to do that, but it's also warranted for other teams and other fans to turn their backs on it
As you
as
saw
well.
what Temple did.
And it's in their right to do so. It is more than just sports, and we can talk about wins and losses, but there is that outside factor. And as much as you want to maybe focus on what he did for the football program, there's still that overshadow that hangs over everything, and that you can't forget that was part of that history of him being a successful college coach.
Would you still, I know you said you honor him for what he did on the field. Is that what he's going to be known for?
You know what? I don't think so. I think as time goes on, he's going to be remembered for the statistics. That tends to be what, especially the sports people, will remember, is the stats and the amount of wins and the longevity. And it's unfortunate that eventually the abuse scandal will start to fade away, and the sports become more prominent. And I mean, that's a problem, I think, probably with society more than with Penn State.
Well, and the reason being that there's no asterisk beside his name saying, "Oh, these wins are tainted because of this." It's not like his players took part in enhancing drugs or anything like that. There's no asterisk beside the wins. The wins are the wins. They're legitimately winning football games. So that's the problem. You can eventually just say, "Oh, well, that's his victories. That's what he has." The rest of it is, like you said, society's kind of issue.
All right, guys, we're going to take a commercial break. When we return, we have Over Under next.